Rumor had it that Bazaar was not doing exceedingly well.
We were way over budget.
There were so many things that suddenly we couldn't do.
We just felt the inconvenience of it all.
The seismic relaunch of Harper's Bazaar in 1992 was only possible, of course, because Hearst was willing to make a significant investment in a legacy title that had lost its way.
It was a risk, but it made sense in a growth industry.
But in 1995, after an era of extravagance, things changed at Harper's Bazaar. The party didn't end, but they turned up the lights.
I'm Dennis Kalanka.
I'm Cynthia True. Back in 1992, we were brand new assistants at Harper's Bazaar and witnessed firsthand its remarkable return from newsstand oblivion to its former status as America's most innovative fashion magazine.
The 90s were the era of celebrity designers and supermodels. Magazines were at their peak influence, and suddenly no magazine mattered more than Bazaar, a hip alternative to Vogue. And no one was more celebrated than its effervescent editor, Liz Tilberis.
This is Blow Up, when Liz Tilberis transformed Bazaar.
You're listening to Episode 5, A Changing Landscape.
If magazines were at their peak influence in the 90s, by 1995, the specter of the digital revolution was just starting to creep into the consciousness, sort of like AI circa 2012. And competition was also getting tougher at the newsstand, particularly for fashion magazines. It was a category more crowded than ever before, with Elle, Mirabella, Marie Claire, and In Style joining Vogue and Bazaar. And the newsstand was what mattered to Hearst, far more than the subscriber who paid less than $15 a year.
So despite all the awards and the success at needling Vogue, Hearst was feeling the pressure. Former Bazaar fashion director Paul Cavaco.
We weren't privy to the numbers or anything of whether we were doing well or not, but rumor had it that Bazaar was not doing exceedingly well.
On the same day that Liz went in for her bone marrow transplant, July 26, 1995, Hearst held a meeting, which Liz attended before reporting to the hospital, to announce that they needed to cut costs dramatically.
Claes Berenberg had made a bold decision in this uncertain media environment, and it had been poorly received by advertisers. Susan Magrino, Liz's former publicist.
I think, the magazine world was really starting to change, which is why Claes, if you remember, he cut the rate base. And it ended up, sometimes you can play ball with that, but it ended up being a disaster.
The way Liz explained it, in a bid to address major increases in paper and postage that were affecting the company's bottom line, Hearst decided they would print fewer copies, and at the same time raise ad rates and their newsstand price. They were willing to let go of subscribers, those discount readers who were considered less brand loyal anyway.
The advertisers, however, were undelighted about this new plan that involved them paying a higher rate for fewer eyeballs. Many of them pushed back. As Liz put it, the reaction was, "Who the hell do you think you are?" Kraft Foods walked away completely. Although Bazaar was not as directly affected as some other Hearst titles, it plunged the company into 2 years of damage control and changed its overall relationship with the ad community.
The belt-tightening was relative, however. The staff didn't feel a big change day to day. You could still stay at the hotel cost when you were in Paris. You could still order up champagne and caviar for your friends. Former Bazaar editors Richard Sinnott and Elisa Santisi.
We just felt the inconvenience of it all because instead of having a car wait for you for 8 hours, you'd have to get dropped off and then call another one.
All of a sudden, we couldn't fly business. But you know what? That was the most fun trip because she split everyone up. You didn't do Milan and Paris. And I remember it was Paul, Melanie, and I went to Milan, and Paul brought a pitcher of vodka and cranberry, and I switched seats so I could sit next to him. And I remember he went to the bathroom and changed into pajamas, and I just laughed. We laughed the whole trip.
Yeah. But Liz felt the changes intensely. She was depleted by the bone marrow transplant and the chemotherapy that followed. It was morale-busting to have Hearst turning up the pressure at the same time.
Liz was a pragmatist. She understood it was business. But it was frustrating after the unparalleled quality they had delivered to be left feeling that they needed to do better on less, especially because Liz felt the company had been rather ham-fisted in its handling of the ad rate matter. But she really liked Clay's. Along with Veronica Hearst, he had been her unwavering champion all along. For Liz, the worst blow was his departure in 1996.
Kathy Black, who would later, very briefly, be New York City Schools chancellor, replaced Berenberg as president of Hearst. She came from a long magazine career as the first female publisher of New York Magazine and then publisher and president of USA Today. Under Black's leadership, Hearst expanded, launching O, the Oprah magazine, and the Food Network magazine. But Liz and Kathy had an uneasy relationship from day one.
Liz didn't love her because, life was so good for so long. I mean, who's going to like, it's like you work somewhere, you get a new boss, and they're not as nice as the last one. It was kind of a little bit of that, but it was obviously more serious because, there were so many things that suddenly we couldn't do.
Liz's former assistant, Stephanie Albertson.
I know that there were photo shoots single shoots in an issue that cost upwards of $200,000 to $300,000. So imagine you have how many spreads in an issue.
And sometimes those shoots were killed and then reshot.
And so the budgets were huge numbers, and Kathy was hired to cut those budgets. And so Liz would, if I ever heard her angry, it was about that. They were trying to clip her creative, and I think she felt like if they kept doing that, she would be on the chopping block too. And I think she had obviously very real concerns about having a job and having life insurance and health insurance for her children. And so I think keeping her job was really important to her, but also maintaining the creative caliber and her vision.
The answer to pumping up newsstand sales, everyone felt, was to embrace celebrity. Bazaar, like most fashion magazines, featured almost exclusively models on the cover, save one or two special issues a year. But it was a new era, and it was time for a more commercial approach. Liz also thought fun, highly stylized celebrity shoots would help offset the distressing heroin chic accusations.
Liz brought Vogue celebrity booker Maggie Buckley in as special projects editor. Maggie was Irish and ridiculously charming, and everyone just loved her. With Maggie on board, we booked 5 celebrity covers in '95 and then 5 in '96. We did Liz Hurley, Uma Thurman, Sharon Stone, Julia Roberts, Nicole Kidman, and even Princess Diana. The uptick was an industry-wide thing, spurred by the huge success of Vanity Fair. Vogue, Bazaar, and others were competing for the biggest cover stars.
But Liz wasn't thrilled about it. She loved her models. "I've had to acknowledge," she said, "that celebrity sells in America, even though an actress is not a professional model, and we don't always get what we want." Paul, who had not yet gone to Vogue, didn't love the idea either.
I did not want to do celebrities. They come kind of with who they are. And, the whole job of a model is to sort of be a chameleon. And then you have someone at the time like Linda Evangelista who you could just change a million times.
Paul, who loved film and used lots of cinematic references in his work, wasn't resistant to an actor in the right context. In 1992, long before there was any pressure to stunt cast anyone, he used the little-known Hugh Grant as a gorgeous supporting player for an ambitious Peter Lindbergh shoot starring Linda Evangelista. He had just seen Maurice, a British indie movie Grant starred in.
Anna Sui and I got obsessed with how beautiful Hugh Grant is. She goes, "You should get Hugh Grant." So I said, okay. So they got us Hugh Grant, and we flew him in.
The story was called Sheer Nights, and it was inspired by photographer Melvin Sokolsky's work in the 1960s, and also the 1942 film I Married a Witch, starring Veronica Lake.
Sokolsky had done these pictures in Bazaar of girls flying across the page. It's the girl in the bubble that people have copied so much. It was girls flying in Central Park, girls flying over dinner tables. So that was the nod to, old Bazaar, but also I had just seen at the Metropolitan Museum had done a thing. It was called Théâtre de Mode, and it was all the couturiers and people that made gloves and hats and shoes in Paris when the fashion industry closed down during the war, had reopened. And the way that they were sort of selling their things was they had little mannequins, and they dressed the mannequins to promote the fact that Paris fashion was back. And all the mannequins were put into situations like little dioramas, and the dioramas were done by Cocteau, Barad, all these artists. The exhibition had traveled around the world and then suddenly got lost. It was discovered just as we did Bazaar at that same moment in the basement of a museum somewhere in the Midwest. And they brought it to the Metropolitan. And one of the things was I Married a Witch. So I thought this is a perfect thing. So we did Linda flying.
It was not just Linda flying. It was Linda flying through the streets of New York City in a pre-Photoshop world.
When Linda was first told about the shoot, they mentioned Hugh Grant. She wasn't familiar with him, but when she got to set, she found him handsome and very nice, too. He was happy to play the part of a man in pursuit of an airborne evangelista.
I came down to earth for him, you see.
But what Linda was really into was the flying part. They'd had a harness specially made for her.
Yes, I was harnessed and they made the harness on my measurements. The harness is under the garments and it comes out the back.
It was like denim cutoffs. They had gotten a pair of jeans, cut them off, and lined them in shearling. The whole thing is lined in shearling. So she has to put the shorts on, and there's 2 hooks on either side of her waist. Then there's 2 wires that lift her up.
And the first time I went up, I was so excited. And as soon as they hoisted me up, I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, 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 let me down. It was awful. I was like, how does Peter Pan do this every night on Broadway?
She was in pain the whole time. And then she would be literally, there was one photograph where she is on top of a street sign. She is up there and she's standing there and literally she is bent over completely, trying to like she was slumped so that she couldn't feel.
Oh my God. It was so painful to be in the air. I didn't realize how painful. So yes, when you see me on the sign, I'm resting.
That's amazing.
I'm taking the weight off while he changes the roll of film. And then he's like, oh, stay there, you know?
And then Peter went, okay. And then she just like literally in 2 seconds came up and modeled. And it was like anything that was on her face that was showing that she was upset or hurt or anything, gone.
You make it look so effortless to know that you were actually...
I'm dying.
That's crazy.
I will do anything to get a good picture.
Sheer Nights is nothing but great pictures. Another one of those early Lindbergh fantasy shoots that raised the bar. But that was about an actor serving the story, not an actor replacing a model on a cover. From 1993, however, we were doing a couple of celebrity covers a year as a special thing.
I said we should only do specific celebrities like they used to do in Vogue would do them, you know, Julie Christie or Cher or something, but it was always a reason for doing them, you know, and it was usually based on their chic and their beauty. So I said we should only do it that way, and I don't really want to do it. So Tawny, you know, we did Daryl Hannah was the first cover that we did, and Tawny did it because I didn't want to do it. And then, of course, I met Daryl Hannah in the elevator with Tawny, and I thought, I'm an idiot. I should have done it. She's so fabulous looking, and she's so nice. I should have done it.
I also have a story about Daryl Hannah in the elevator. First of all, I'm a huge fan. And in 1993, she was at peak fame after her movies like Splash and Wall Street. She was also dating John Kennedy Jr. And she didn't do much press, so it was kind of a coup that we got her. Anyway, one day Liz calls and asks me to come to her office. I was still an art department assistant, and it was rare for her to call me directly. So I jump up and go right over. And Liz explains that she's down an assistant and Daryl Hannah is coming up to her office. She says, Dennis, I need you to go get $100 worth of pennies, please, right away. She handed me the petty cash herself. So I run down the block to the bank and I ask for $100 in pennies.
That's 10,000 pennies, about 50 pounds.
Yeah, but they go get them. And I lug these 2 bags of pennies down the block as fast as I can, up to Liz's office. I'm dying, but you know, it's Daryl Hannah. Liz's one assistant is now back, so I drop the bags in front of her desk. I'm like, here, these are for Liz. And she looks at me. She's like, "What are you doing? What is this?" And I'm like, "These are the pennies Liz asked for." And she says, no, not pennies. She wanted peonies.
That's hilarious.
I can hear her saying peonies, and it's sounding very close to pennies. These translation errors were not uncommon at Bazaar because the green American assistants, like us, were not necessarily experienced with a mix of accents around the office.
Oh, I couldn't understand what anyone in that office was saying for the first 3 weeks I worked there. Anyway, so I have to haul all these pennies back to the bank as fast as I can because the flower guy definitely isn't going to take $100 of pennies. But the bank teller doesn't want them either. He's pissed when he sees I'm back. He's like, "Oh, no, sorry. You're going to have to write your account number on each roll first." So I'm panicking, and I start rambling, and I say, "Please, hey, Daryl Hannah's coming. This is for Harper's Bazaar. I work for Harper's Bazaar." And he's like, "You work for Harper's Bazaar?" I love Harper's Bazaar. Here, give them to me. Go.
The power of Bazaar in 90s New York.
So I've got my petty cash. I go running down the street to the flower guy, and I'm like, "Just give me all the peonies I can get for $100, all white," which was Liz's thing. I go running back to the office. I sprint across the lobby. I'm like pounding the elevator button. Daryl Hannah is going to be here any second. Finally, an elevator opens. I jump in, and at the last second, I see Daryl Hannah coming. So I hit door close, door close, door close. The elevator doors basically shut on her. She's like 5 feet away. But I got up to Liz's office, and by the time Daryl Hannah made it up there, we had those peonies in vases, and it looked perfect.
Whatever the staff resistance to ramping up celebrity coverage, they all had to admit that celebrities generated the best inside stories. When Hugh Grant returned to Bazaar in '96 to grace the cover with his then-partner Liz Hurley, and somewhat mysteriously a chimpanzee, it wasn't Bazaar's most inspired cover. But the shoot, done just weeks after Grant had been caught with a sex worker named Divine Brown, was legendary. The editors were barely able to contain themselves as Patrick Demarchelier kept innocently calling out, "Divine, Divine," as he shot the couple.
But our most epic celebrity shoot had to be in '96, when Peter Lindbergh did a big fashion story with Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee. Not who you'd expect to see modeling in the pages of Bazaar. But again, it was a new era.
And so it's Peter Lindbergh, and we're shooting on 57th and 5th.
Oh my God.
We end up in a lawsuit because Peter ends... So we're walking in the street.
Mm-hmm.
It's Tommy and Pamela at the height of her beauty. She could not have been more beautiful at that moment. Very tan, blonde hair. She looks glorious. And then she's given the treatment. Deal does her hair, She looks so beautiful. And they're walking, and people obviously know who they are. And we have 5 guards, but the people are coming up and touching them. And this paparazzi kept following them. And he would get in the middle of Peter's picture. And Peter would sometimes take it with the paparazzi because he thought it was funny. But he was kind of really too much there. And even if we asked him nicely, he would. And he got into a thing with the head of security. I think the camera broke. And then Peter took us to the San Gennaro festival. So we went there. It was like the insanity factor. They're eating like, soubretta
Right.
things. So they're everywhere in the street. Peter's not paying attention. The fact that Liz let us photograph them, we said, we have to. She was willing because she understood popular culture and what people were talking about. Right. And do you remember when the tape came? It's like the sex tape. That's all. The fact that they got married was insane. So we were all dying.
After you left, it was felt. I mean, there was a change, obviously in environment, but also in the look of the magazine. And that might have been timing because that's when we were embracing celebrity more. So maybe it was a good time for you to go.
Well, then I went to Vogue and did celebrities.
In February 1996, 6 months after the bone marrow transplant, Liz's cancer returned. She was starting to realize it wasn't going to go away, but she hoped it could be managed long term. She started chemotherapy once again and continued until September, when totally worn down, she had a conversation with Diana, who told her, "It's your body. If you want to stop, stop. You have to have control."
There was just so much going on. She needed to put out the magazine, charm advertisers, and fundraise for ovarian cancer research.
She was pulled in so many different directions, and she wanted to be very present for her kids, and she wanted to be at all their events. And I think that as she got further along in her diagnosis and her treatment, she became very involved with the Ovarian Cancer Research Fund. And there was that whole side. I think the biggest pressures really were all the events that we were doing. We had all kinds of things going on all the time, and
Kids for Kids.
The creation of Super Saturday with Donna Karan, then all the Ovarian Cancer Research Fund. They were doing, I think, like educational seminars, and then we had the hotline for all of their help calls coming to Liz's office. So we were screening calls from women who were calling in to get help.
On top of all that, Liz felt she had to defend her position at work. It had gotten back to her that months earlier, while she was in the hospital for the bone marrow transplant, a few editors had sent their resumes to Hearst in case they needed a new editor-in-chief. She had heard that people were whispering about potential successors, and she appreciated how loyal Clay's had been. Never, she wrote later, even appointing a deputy editor during my absence. But now that Clay's was gone, she didn't feel she could be as transparent with corporate. She worried about what they might do if they sensed that she was at all diminished.
Against that backdrop, Liz was co-chairing the 1996 Met Gala.
We did the Costume Institute ball before Vogue owned that.
Anna Wintour had chaired the Met Gala for the first time the previous year, and this year was Bazaar's turn. Christian Dior was sponsoring the gala to celebrate its 50th anniversary, which was especially meaningful to Liz, as it was Bazaar's editor-in-chief, Carmel Snow, who had championed Dior in the late 40s. "It's quite a revolution, dear Christian," Snow famously said. "Your dresses have such a new look." A funny side note about Carmel Snow, Liz enjoyed that they were both descended from textile families and were both prematurely white-haired.
Springtime in Paris was the theme, and all these, people from Dior were coming all the time for meetings with her leading up to that.
Liz had a grand vision for the Met Gala. What she wanted more than anything was that people would walk in and feel surrounded by Dior's creations. She didn't want them encased in glass, at a remove, as they must be when the Costume Institute owns them. So she set out, working with Bazaar's European editor, Jane Catani, to borrow dozens and dozens of Dior's most exquisite dresses from private clients, including movie stars such as Sophia Loren, who lent her black and crepe dress from Arabesque, and Isabella Rossellini, who lent her mother Ingrid Bergman's black and cream silk dress from Indiscreet. There was a floral organza from Tina Turner and a blue damask from Isabella Gianni. Incredibly, they even got some of Eva Perón's favorite dresses, sent from Argentina by her niece. While those requests were flying across time zones, Liz asked Princess Diana if she would be her guest of honor. Diana said she'd be glad to. She would fly in for one night with her sister, Lady Sarah McCorkdale.
The logistics of collecting all of these priceless dresses from around the globe were overwhelming. That was to say nothing of planning the guest list, the very delicate seating arrangement, and every detail of the princess's quick trip. Also, they had just over 24 hours to set up the party in the Met's Great Hall. The museum would close Sunday at 5, and the gala was Monday night.
We were way over budget. I remember being on the phone with Liz. It was late at night, and it was, we were going to have to spend another, $50,000 to get this event pulled off the way that she was like, "Oh, fuck it, Steph, just spend the fucking money, get it done, get it done."
In a way, though, it was nice to lose herself in the many visual details of the event.
Liz planned to display the dresses on invisible structures so they appeared to be suspended midair in the Great Hall, almost like a canopy of dresses. Underneath were overstuffed sofas covered in Dior's signature gray and white stripes.
Meanwhile, Liz made sure Diana's suite at the Carlisle was just so, enlisting a small team to make it feel as charming as possible. She even bought t-shirts and skateboarding magazines for Diana's sons, since the princess wouldn't have time to shop.
I'll tell you a funny story. Prior to the princess arriving for the Costume Institute ball, Liz wanted her hotel room at the Carlisle decked out, like ready for her arrival. Liz and I had gotten to know Thomas O'Brien, the interior designer, quite well, and his partner. And so we hired them to do that. And so the three of us, they were so excited. I mean, they found chocolate princess cut out, chocolates for her bathroom. I mean, they were so into it. But we were all like, we walked in like to do a last check. We had been given access by the hotel for 2 days prior to get it ready. But our final check, we got there, and on the bed, on the pillow, was a gift from Barbara Walters. And we were like, how did that get here?
Liz met the princess and her sister at the airport, where a helicopter flew them into Manhattan. She escorted them to their hotel and rushed home to dress. Liz was wearing the last dress Gianfranco Ferré made for Dior, and the princess was wearing the first John Galliano, both navy blue. By the time Liz went back to the Carlisle to collect Diana, a huge crowd had gathered, encouraged no doubt by the waiting photographers. Liz and Andrew were shocked to see one man actually bang on the window and chase the car. He had a photo he wanted the princess to sign. But that was nothing compared to the controlled chaos when they arrived at the Met. Liz remembered being blinded by the lights as the cameras clicked away, everyone shouting, "Diana, Diana, Diana," no pause. She couldn't believe Diana went through that every day.
I'll never forget arriving that night. The fashion department called me in a Prada suit to wear for the event. I was feeling very fancy walking up those stairs, until someone accidentally brushed their lit cigarette against the sleeve of my suit jacket. It didn't burn a hole, but it did leave a mark. When my friend Robin Raskin and I arrived, we were surrounded by these incredible dresses. It was surreal and so beautiful. We decided to search around to see if we could get a peek of Princess Diana. It was a quick moment, but from afar we did see her and Liz.
Liz said later that Diana looked so stunning in her Galliano that many of the guests were too intimidated to say hello. Liz wished she had organized a small reception area off to the side where people could meet her a few at a time. The dinner itself was stunning, with a caterer flown in from Paris and tables covered in green and white organza tablecloths, matching embroidered napkins, and set with china stamped with Dior's signature flower, Lily of the Valley. Liz swore she saw several guests stuffing napkins into their bags.
It was one of those larger-than-life New York nights. I mean, for one thing, you're in the Met. Then Liz had created this fantasy Dior world, which was filled with every celebrity you could imagine. All the supermodels, rock stars, movie stars, Calvin Klein, Donna Karan, Martha Stewart, and of course the princess, who out-celebed everybody. She just glowed. We were so happy for Liz. And the next day, the footage of them arriving together just exploded. It was everywhere. Suddenly, the whole country knew about the Met Gala.
The next morning, Liz got a call from her doctor's office. Test results showed that she was very sick again. They were shocked that she'd had the stamina to be out drinking champagne and dancing. But of course, they'd seen her on TV with Diana.
1997 meant more chemotherapy for Liz. It was kind of a mainstay at this point, with her tumor marker up and down. Like a roller coaster, she said. Nothing about that year was easy. She was working on her memoir, No Time to Die, with the help of writer Amy Lee Ball. It was a moving account of enduring the best and worst life had to offer at the same time.
Liz was also having to put up a brave front at work, maintain the notion that she was perfectly stable, if chronically ill. Things only got more difficult when her good friend Gianni Versace died that summer.
Liz heard about his murder the same day that she started a new chemotherapy drug. She was heartbroken. She had just seen Gianni a week earlier. They were at a big dinner at the Ritz in Paris. They squeezed onto a chair together and gabbed and gabbed. Gianni had recently survived a rare cancer, and they talked about what it was like to face your own mortality.
A few weeks later, in the final stages of her book, Liz asked Princess Diana if she would write the foreword. On Friday, August 29th, Diana's assistant called to say that she'd be delighted to do it, and that Diana would call Liz when she got back to England. She was on vacation in France.
24 hours later, Diana was in a car accident in Paris. When Liz heard, she stayed glued to the TV, like everyone else, until she got the horrible final word.
Her grief was very real. She just cloistered herself for a few days, just didn't want to talk to anyone. The phone was ringing off the hook with people wanting to talk to Liz about her.
There were more than 60 interview requests, but Liz refused to talk to anyone. except for a brief early conversation with Barbara Walters while she was still in shock.
Liz flew with Patrick de Marchelier to London for the funeral. She picked up an enormous bunch of white lilies and took them to a private garden in Kensington Palace near Diana's apartment. Later, Sam McKnight joined them at San Lorenzo for dinner. Liz couldn't stop thinking about Diana's boys, or her own.
Instead of a foreword to her book, Liz honored her friend with an absence of a foreword. I could imagine no one else fulfilling this favor, Liz wrote. And this page pays tribute to her, my friend Diana, Princess of Wales.
Moving into 1998 and 1999, Liz became markedly weaker. She was a realist, but in her positive moments, she envisioned herself as someone who would live with ovarian cancer long term, maybe even managing it long enough for a cure to be found. She was certainly doing everything she could to help fund research and talk about ovarian cancer whenever called upon.
She always was pretty quick to say yes, but there were a few times, I think, where she just felt like, you know what, I need to draw the line. And she was pretty good about signaling to me when that was, and as she got further on, we all just, the three of us, Louisa and she and I, just kind of kept everybody at bay.
Liz was spending a lot of time at home, something that Stephanie and her other assistant, Louisa, kept quiet. If somebody from corporate wanted to see her, they would say she was out at a meeting. At one point, Kathy Black called Stephanie into her office.
Suddenly, she wanted to have me in her office for a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like she was prying. She wanted to know what was really going on with Liz. How is it really here?
Fortunately, corporate was in a different building. We were all protective of Liz. We knew not to say a word.
There was a cover-up going on at the office. You're absolutely right. Kathy was at 959 8th Avenue, and so it wasn't like you could get up and down, and it's easy. Oh, I'm at a fashion show. Oh, I'm here. Oh, I'm there.
By late 1998, Liz was too ill to take her turn hosting the Met Gala again. Vogue stepped in. They were having their best year ever at the newsstand. But those things were not much on Liz's mind. She was focused on her beloved family. In early 1999, Liz began to gently say a few goodbyes around the office.
Stephanie, you wrote in the tribute book that we all had done, the staff, about your last lunch with her at Petrosian.
I thought I was being fired. I really did. In 5 years, we had never gone out to lunch together, just the two of us. But anyway, it must have been in January because she came into the office and she was holding her coat. She had a big, heavy coat. And she stood in front of my desk and she said, "I want a lunch on the calendar with you." And I looked at her kind of funny, like, what is this about? And she said, "Don't worry, you're not being fired," or something like that. And I thought, she's going to fire me. Like, you know, like, so I put the lunch on the calendar. It was like 2 weeks out. And so we sat at lunch and she just wanted to know all about my creative pursuits and aspirations and what I wanted to do. And we talked about my family and her kids. And I mean, we just shot the breeze for 2 hours over caviar and champagne and whatever. And then we got in the car to go back to the office. And I remember looking out the back window of the town car. And I think I knew that was her way of saying goodbye to me. Like that was just her way of thanking me and saying goodbye.
February 23rd, 1999, was Liz's last official day at Bazaar. They called the whole staff into her office. I actually thought they were going to remind us not to talk to the press, because New York Magazine had misquoted me saying that Courtney Love was wearing real fur in our previous issue, and I had gotten in a lot of trouble over it. The managing editor was like, "What were you thinking? Liz is not going to be happy with you." So I was late to the meeting, and I tried to blend into the back of the room. But then she told us she was going to be out of the office for a while. The way I took it was, oh, she's hit a rough patch, but she'll beat it. I didn't realize just how bad it was, because even then she kept it light. At the end, she said, "Okay, guys, no talking to the press. Dennis?"
I think that's what was wonderful about Liz, is that she had this sparkle in her eye, but she knew she was going to die.
The fear of losing Liz, the idea that this person who everyone so loved, the fact that we were, going to lose her, I think it was very scary for the staff.
I didn't want to think about it because it was too sad. Not just the Harper's Bazaar staff was solemn and sad. The fashion world felt it.
Liz died on April 21st, 1999. It happened to be my birthday. The managing editor came into the art department, said happy birthday to me, and then told us. Even if we kind of knew it was coming, we were all shell-shocked. What I remember most about the day was the phones ringing off the hook with questions. We had to keep working because we still had an issue to put out. It was just sad and quiet. People didn't know what to say.
It was devastating. It was just like, it's gone. How many people would have excelled under those circumstances, let alone, some of them don't even show up, but how many of them would have spun gold?
Fabian finished the last issue that Liz worked on, and then he resigned. He explained to Hearst that he couldn't do Bazaar without Liz. Tani went to Vogue and briefly worked alongside Paul Cavaco again. Elisa Santisi was at Vogue now, too. She had left Bazaar a few months earlier, in '98. Peter Lindbergh, Mario Testino, Mario Sorrenti, and David Sims also went to Vogue. But Patrick de Marchelier continued to work for Bazaar with the new editor-in-chief, Kate Betts. He went to Vogue in 2004. Richard Sennett also stayed at Bazaar for just over a year, and then went to Michael Kors as creative director, where he's been ever since, most recently as a consultant. Anne-Marie Iverson became editor-in-chief of YM Magazine and then 17. As for me, I stayed through the summer of '99 and then left to start my career as a photographer. It was like leaving home a second time.
I had long since left Bazaar, but I still felt somewhat a part of things as Dennis's good friend and roommate. I had also written a couple of pieces for the magazine. By 1999, though, I was living in Austin, Texas, writing a book about the comedian Bill Hicks, who had also died young from cancer. When Dennis called to tell me the news, we didn't really say that much. We just sat on the phone together, feeling deeply sad for Liz, for her family, and for an era that was officially over.
But we were also keenly aware of how lucky we were to have found ourselves in proximity to this wonderful editor who not only gave us our first jobs, but access to magical lives in the best city in the world. It made our 20s. We like to think of Liz as having driven away in that dark green Franken car her father built, having endless adventures with the music turned up, yelling out the window, heaven. Thank you for listening. Join us next week for our special final episode. It's a 90s Bazaar reunion with Fabian Baron, Paul Cavaco, Tani Goodman, and Richard Sennett. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, and if you have thoughts, leave a comment below.
Blow Up is hosted and produced by Dennis Galanka and me, Cynthia True. It was written and edited by me, Cynthia True. Original theme song is by Stephen Phillips. Sound design and mix, Eric Weiss. Sound and music editing, Tiger Lily Biscup. The episode was recorded at Voice Tracks West, The Cutting Room, and Digital Arts New York. Special thanks to Clay Morrow and Matthew Saver.